Welcome, everybody. My name is Josh Felperin. I'm the sales director at Alps Controls, one of the leading non-stocking e-commerce distributors in the HVAC industry. Joined with me today are three industry experts to talk about our main subject, data and context. There's a lot of data out there in the buildings, and analytics has been around for a long time, and fault detection, and there's certainly a lot of opportunity for energy efficiencies and different gains. And we're joined again today by three panelists. First, Pete Segall from ATS Automation. He's the energy services manager. We also have Jason Hyatt from Puget Sound Energy, who's the senior energy management engineer there, who will be speaking today. And last but certainly not least, we have Reed Powell from McDonald-Miller, who's the building controls operations manager. So we do invite you to please, if you have any questions during the session, just put them into the dialogue box, and we will have our panelists respond to them here once we go to the moderated session. But thank you for joining us. We hope you get a lot out of this session today. And why don't we kick things off with Pete? Take it away.
All right. Josh, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pete Segall. I am the Energy Services Manager with ATS Automation. Our energy team provides energy services ranging from benchmarking services to building tune-ups to continuous commissioning services to major ESCO energy projects. And data and context is a topic of really specific interest to me because as an organization, we deploy these data analytic tools on nearly all of our energy projects as a means for enhanced functional performance testing, commissioning, warranty management, ongoing performance assurance, and measurement verification. And we have found a way to make the analytic deployments sufficient, cost-effective, and impactful on a small case-by-case individual building basis. One of the most common questions I get asked when discussing data and analytics is, can the deployments be scalable from a cost-effective standpoint for smaller facilities, non-campuses, non-portfolio, standalone buildings? And that's really what we're going to be discussing today, keys to successfully using data to drive better building performance with a special focus on the standalone building that doesn't have a deep team of facility resources. So, and speaking of deep facility resources, when data and analytics are discussed at conferences, much like SBX, the focus tends to be on the major organizations that have dozens, hundreds, if not even thousands of buildings. And these organizations, while doing really great work, tend not to be relatable to what I'll call the regular standalone building or, elementary school or other facility. And these major organizations and supporting consultants tend to be the ones who present at these conferences on these types of data analytic implementations. And the presentations focus on things that are really important, but not necessarily relatable or critical to that standalone building. And throughout probably this week here at SBX, you're going to hear people talk about data lakes and digital twins and these NOCs, or these national operations centers, where you'll have, a dedicated team of energy engineers and resource conservation managers. They sit in front of these, these screens, kind of like what I have up on the screen here, and they're looking at data, and they're really focused on this better building performance. And again, this is, really important. However, at times it feels to me like a little bit of a let them eat cake type of moment. At worst, it can be a little tone deaf to those singular building operators. And at best, maybe the information really isn't applicable to that average operator. And, most buildings or building operators don't have a team of people with a seemingly unlimited budget to use all this data in bulk and scale. And that's really what we want to focus on today, is what we've been kind of on the side calling, data for the rest of us, or data for the normal person, basically. And we want to show you that an individual standalone building with limited resources can benefit from data and analytics. So I'm going to level set here real quick and take a step back and start with the question, why data? And it really does start with a simple question. And do we really know how our buildings are operating? And the answer is, of course we do. We know how our buildings are operating, but how do we know when there's a problem? Are we waiting for tenants to complain or people to complain about hot and cold calls? how frequently have we verified systems in the past? Have we done a, retro commissioning project recently? From the get-go, were the control strategies sound and well designed, or have things changed? Were those design assumptions correct, or has space use changed maybe, and now the design doesn't necessarily make sense? Are the systems still running as originally expected? They haven't degraded over time or failed or been overridden. What happens when no one's watching? What happens on weekends? What happens at nights? What happens early in the morning in the middle of winter when the building's starting up early for morning warm up? Is it operating properly? And when we're talking about these standalone buildings, and maybe there's only one building engineer, how does this one person who has to wear a multitude of hats, kind of keep track of hundreds of pieces of equipment and potentially thousands of points of data all at once? And, now more than ever, our systems are more complicated than before, and they provide even more data than, ever before. So really, the reason for data is the key to better building performance is hidden in this data. So what I want to talk about today is, again, data for the rest of us, a case study, and understanding how one of these singular buildings can benefit and improve based on data. So what I'm going to be talking about today is a project. It's in the Denver area. It's a single building. There's one property manager. There's one building engineer. It is part of a portfolio, but it's individually operated. There's no NOC. There's no data lake. There's no digital twin. There's no RCM team. It's data for the rest of us. This particular building is about 150,000 square feet. There's a restaurant. There's also underground parking, pretty standard kind of multi-tenant building. The building was finished construction in 2015, so relatively new building. The first full year, 2016, when it was relatively fully occupied, the EUI was a 92.5. So, okay, not great though. By 2019, just a couple of years later, the EUI had increased to over a 105. But currently, over this process of using data, we now have the building down to an 84.5. And this is a graph of the EUI usage month over month. We're starting in December of 19. That was kind of their peak of their EUI at that one, almost a 106. And we started this data service, if you will, starting in basically December, January of 2019. And you can see right off the bat, those first few months, you can see a steep decrease, almost 10 points over the first 4 months of EUI. And that was really that low-hanging fruit, that really easy work that we're able to do, identifying poor building schedules, getting a handle on the building set points, which were all over the board, and doing some really easy no-cost measures. And we were able to get some really good savings right out of the bat. The next thing I want to point out is when you think of projects like this, don't think of them as a project. Think of them as an ongoing service or an ongoing process, almost like, painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You finish one side of it, you got to turn right back around and continue doing it. When you're talking about data and anything kind of commissioning related, it is about a process. We've done plenty of fixes to things that we fixed 3 years ago when we found out it got overridden again. So it's not like it's a one and done thing. The other thing I want you to note is you notice that we flatlined around April of 2020 and actually had an increase the winter of 2020 and 21. Something happened back then in 2020 and the building operation changed due to COVID operations. The building hours were increased and then ventilation was increased as well. So there was a penalty to pay there. But once in around August of 21, once we left COVID operation, you can see that performance improving again. And you can see it's, I look at this chart kind of like when I graph my diet. I try to ignore the individual days, but what I try to pay attention to is the overall process and improvement. So with this building, what data do we use? Because people often ask me, well, what data are you looking at when you're talking about data analytics? In this particular case, and this isn't the same for every building, we're looking at building automation data. We're looking at sub-metering data. We're looking at occupancy data, weather data, and then also bringing in utility data through Energy Star Portfolio Manager. All of this gets inputted into this analytics software machine. And there's tons of different analytics software platforms out there. I'm not here to talk about any particular one because they all do something relatively similar. This data comes in on the back end, on the output side, you get data visualizations, you get reporting, you get fault detection, you get KPIs, you get all this information, which is amazing and great. However, the real question is, now what? What do you do with this? And this is the point in time where I see more often than not, if data analytic projects are going to fail, they don't fail on the technology side as often as they fail at the now what side. Like once you get the information, and that's where the process is really important. A process for who does what and when do they do it and how do you hold people accountable. This is a very simple process that we use at a high level, but there has to be some sort of process put in place. So one of the things that we did in this singular case study of the singular building, how did we achieve success? And it starts with a handful of things. First of all, as I just talked about, the technology is important. It is the enabler behind this. This would not be easily achievable if we were just using traditional methods of collecting data, like just spreadsheets and trying to gather everything and look at data without the analytics tool. So the technology is important, but the process, as I just said, that's even more critical. One of the pieces of the process was a regular cadence. Meeting with this one building operator and this one property manager on a monthly meeting. And this monthly cadence really drove accountability. No one wanted to let down other people when there were tasks assigned and things that needed to get done. So having this regular cadence drove accountability. Another thing that happened is when you think about these types of projects or services, there's a software piece, so the analytics software and deploying that. There could be a consulting piece, someone helping this building or operator, take this data and do something with it. But almost just as important to that is where the rubber meets the road, the implementation piece. This particular building had an existing mechanical and control service contract. So issues that were found at these monthly meetings were able to be corrected and fixed through these existing service contracts, which was very helpful. And without that, you only have half the story there. You need to actually implement corrective actions. The other piece that drove success was having this very engaged property manager and building engineer. That is absolutely key, is having people feel that accountability and want to succeed and being part of these meetings. So that was very helpful, having an engaged owner. And then the other thing that made things successful was the ability to identify those low cost and almost no cost operational improvements and modifications that could get pushed right back to that mechanical and control service contracts without any additional costs for that better building operation. So that was really important. We did focus on that monthly basis on the process, trying to recognize that this isn't, in 3 months we're done and we can all put up the mission accomplished banner. Everyone recognize this is a marathon and not a sprint. Every month we would highlight our progress and successes. We would look at that Energy Star portfolio manager, see if the EUI went down, see if the Energy Star score went up, look at the data in the energy spend. And then we would identify the successes, and that actually helped us continue moving forward and people wanting to continue with the process. And then the last piece, and this is not necessarily a key to the success, but it was a side benefit. There was a requirement for doing an energy audit for the building, and all the data and the information as part of this process really enhanced that energy audit and made it a much better audit. So I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about some of the things that we actually did. When I look at building operations, I can kind of drop them into a few different categories. When I think about controls, it's the 3 S's of controls. You have schedules, set points, and sequences, but then also you have to think about failures and overrides and faults and issues and things of that nature. I'm just going to hit up on a few things that we did in this building that may be of interest to people. First and foremost, schedules. There was a little bit of a training issue. The operator of the building was supposed to be operating from 6 to 6 p.m. The operator of the building felt that, well, geez, if I wanted to start at 6 a.m., I better start the building actually at 4 a.m. so it has a chance to warm up or cool down. What the person didn't realize was there was optimum start already put in place. And even though they put a 4 a.m. schedule, there's an optimum start, maximum advance time. And because the set points of the buildings were so out of whack, Set points that weren't achievable by design, like 70-degree cooling, when the design for cooling, I think, was 74 in the building. There were zones that were calling for the maximum advance time of the building, and we had air handlers actually starting 4 hours before the 4 a.m. start time. So with a little bit of seeing the data, understanding what was going on, a little bit of training, we were able to set the schedules back to 6 a.m. with a 2-hour max advance time, and saved a lot of energy just based on operations. I mentioned how set points were all over the board, but even set points for the air handlers. This building was served by 2 massive rooftop units. And right out of the bat, we realized that, geez, the average damper positions for the VAV boxes during normal operation were quite low, which what that tells me is the duct static pressure was running higher than necessary. So we're able to lower some of the minimum duct static pressure set points and reduce the load on the air handler supply fans. Another challenge to buildings, especially multi-tenant buildings with 1 or 2 big air handlers, how does it supposed to operate when only part of the building is operated? What happens during morning warm-up? When do those air handlers kick on for warm-up or cool down? Can we have the local zones provide warm-up? What happens during night high limit and low limit? We spent a lot of time addressing how the building should operate in those part load conditions. And one of the things we found during those part load conditions is the building operated with a minimum outside air. It was a straight CFM. And that was fine for design if the building operated all at once. However, when 1 floor was running, the minimum outside CFM was actually more than that singular floor required because of the straight outside air CFM set point. So there were times when only 1 floor was running, the air handler was trying to provide more CFM than was necessary, and it was all 100% outside air. And because it was the singular floor running later at night, it tended to be colder outside, and so we had to provide a lot more heating than necessary. One other interesting thing we found was these are parallel fan-powered VAV boxes. For whatever reason, the fan-powered VAV fan would operate during heating as it should, but wouldn't shut off until not a 0% heating signal, but greater than a 0% cooling signal. So the fans were running actually hours and hours longer than necessary. And so that was a find that we made. And then one of the other things we found is just poor RTU tuning. The air handler the economizer wasn't tuned very well. During those shoulder seasons, it would open up too much. It would get too cold, then the heat would kick on, then it would get too hot, then the dampers would open, and it was the cycle all shoulder season long. So those are just some examples of some of the things that we found throughout this process. So some of the keys to success at a high level: the technology is the engine that makes these projects possible and efficient to do, but it's the people and the process and the planning and setting expectations that make the project successful. With that, I am going to pass it along to Jason. Let's see if I can do this though.
Okay, can you hear me, see me okay? Awesome. I think following that, I'm going to be more of a palate cleanser than a all-inclusive kind of utility perspective, but I hope to kind of give you a little background. It's mostly from my experience, which is worked at PSC for 17 years now. I think I've known Pete for all of those. And I do a plethora, a myriad of different custom projects, but definitely spend a lot of time on controls programs, and with relation to this, I manage our portfolio of commissioning programs, and that's where I spend the majority of my time these days with ATS, McMiller, and many others. What we've really tried to do with our commissioning programs is to really reduce as many barriers as we can to participation. I think Pete kind of mentioned it. We can't just design these programs for the portfolio customers, the large customers. It really needs to be all encompassing. So one of the things we try to do is make it a self-qualifying. So a customer, a contractor, a commissioning professional, they can just look at these questions and say, yeah, I think I've got a good candidate to push through commissioning, and use that as a path to get them to their energy efficiency goals or perhaps compliance with clean buildings. Of course, they need to be a PSE customer. Occupancy equal to or greater than 75 includes all the conditioned square feet. Building level metering, management and operations are, want to go through with this type of work. The building is greater than 50,000 square feet. Of course, we have a campus exception. And kind of one of the quantifiers I use is, if you're building, your EUI is larger than your target, this would probably be a good opportunity for you to use a commissioning process. There are other, qualifying factors that might be for each individual building, such as the training component, or perhaps you have new operations staff, you have to get to know it better, you got a new building and you want to get to know your building better, or you just don't know how to get to your compliance path. It is a good beginning point. And of course, DDC controls. If you can check yes to all of these, you're a slam dunk, and commissioning is a good opportunity for you. If there's perhaps one, like your occupancy hasn't quite recovered from COVID, or one of these items might not be a check mark, you can still call us, and we are happy to discuss. And perhaps it doesn't matter. We have looked at a few buildings that still have a reduced occupancy, or buildings that have very dense, energy dense buildings. We still might be happy to do a commissioning for less than 50,000 square feet, things of that nature. There's always some wiggle room. These are the basic offerings that we have. And this is just a quick overview. I really didn't want to bog you down with too much information, but the three offerings that we have are our existing building commissioning, which is, full investigation, mostly manual process to identify the opportunities within your building. We have 3 phases for it. We have the assessments, that's a guaranteed 5,000. And I'm just going to speak to the all PSE customer. We do have different stages or different incentive levels for different types of customers, since we have a bit of a jigsaw puzzle of offerings throughout our territory. But for an all PSE customer, it'd be 5,000 for the assessment, which is the initial review. And then you'll see kind of implementation and the rest of these, where that's where you're actually identifying what's wrong, implementing any opportunities that were identified. And for our commissioning, we kind of expect off the top like a general 5% savings. So both of the implementation and the assessment are a guaranteed incentive amount. And if you push to even greater savings, a 6% performance target, then we're able to offer another incentive for the performance component, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, 80 cents per therm. And that's consistent across all the performance periods you see. The monitoring-based commissioning is a technology-based process where we're using, fault detection diagnostic software. Of course, there's still that process working with, the commissioning professionals to help kind of, do that change, get that change management working within your organization. And for that one, we have the implementation, and we have 2 performance targets. One might ask, why do you have 2? Well, monitoring-based commissioning is an ongoing commissioning process, and we want to make sure that the customer is fully integrated the process into their daily work lives, their monthly meetings, their quarterly meetings, whatever the case may be, so that this doesn't just get dropped and we lose all those savings. So we want to work with the customer for a couple of years to make sure that the savings persist. And finally, we have the tune-up, which is a more prescriptive process, and it has the 2 phases for one for implementation and one for the performance. And for the implementation, it's at 5,000 per 100,000 square feet. So it can be more than that, the assessment fee, which is just that one-time fee. This is a table that kind of outlines the different opportunities with our commissioning offerings. And you might say, well, you just showed me 3. Why are there 5 columns? I guess 6 for the naming conventions. What we've done is we basically added an a la carte kind of option for our monitoring-based commissioning, so that you can tag on monitoring-based commissioning with our prescriptive tune-up path, or through the existing building commissioning, instead of using that manual process, actually use monitoring-based commissioning to automate a lot of the processes that would be ongoing through that existing building commissioning. And if, as you can see, the last two on the ends, the ones that are tune-up plus and existing building plus, that is plus monitoring-based commissioning. It would have just looked funny in the row if I put monitoring-based commissioning. It would have made another line. So a plus seemed classy. But as you can see with the total incentive at the bottom, we really want to push customers towards doing kind of an all of the above approach. We really think that doing the existing building commissioning along with monitoring-based commissioning is really the gold standard chef's kiss of commissioning. And in these, I've used a 150,000 square foot building to kind of align with what Pete was talking about, and did basically a 10% savings to kind of give you an idea of how it would look for each one of those. Obviously, for the prescriptive path for tune-up, it's only 21,000, and I think about 50% is performance-based incentives, and then for the monitoring base, obviously it gets higher, and existing building commissioning, since it is so detail oriented, it's a higher amount than the 3. But then we get into higher realms for the tune-up and the existing building to have the monitoring base, where we actually add another incentive level for that year 2, so that we can get those persistence of savings. So that's kind of the outline of all the different programs. And with that, I will go ahead and kick it off to Reed to discuss McDonald-Miller. There we go.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, audio, PowerPoint, handoff successful, 3 thumbs up. Okay, hopefully everyone enjoyed the keynote this morning, and then learn a little bit about Pete's take on data and context, kind of agree with all points there. And then as a partner of Jason's in the marketplace in the Pacific Northwest, those incentives have been super helpful in removing roadblocks for clients and actually getting to a phase where they can start using data. So we'll all rip through a few things about McDonald-Miller, talking about what we've learned about data and context, some of the things where we've maybe bloodied our noses, as well as, in partnership with clients or just on our own with our own buildings. And then really looking forward to getting to the moderated discussion from Josh and discussing more questions. And then as a reminder, please be putting stuff in the Q&A for those of you who are out there, so we can hit those direct and specific questions. Again, Josh gave a little intro for me. My name is Reed Powell. I've been at McDonald-Miller for coming up on eight and a half years, soon to be 9. And I do operations management and support smart buildings. For us, what smart buildings is, that's integrated mechanical controls and analytics maintenance programs for clients, and then also our controlled installations for owner direct work. For those of you who aren't familiar with McDonald-Miller, and maybe you're calling in from all parts of the world or parts of the US, we are a Pacific Northwest regional contractor. We heavily believe that building operation and commercial real estate is a relation-based business, and we want to have boots on the ground in every place that we're supporting clients. So this is where we focus our work and where our offices are spread in the Washington and Oregon region. So why are we even talking about, why would you have been dialing into this expo for 3 days wanting to learn? And we have some pretty compelling reasons that respectable entities out there in the marketplace have gone and found and put into pretty consumable bite-sized pieces of data. First one, buildings are wasting energy. That's where FBD has come from. That's where smart buildings has come from. How do we help save energy, whether that's through tenant engagement or better operation from a controls perspective? So focus area number 1, energy. Okay, next is comfort. 40% of people are dissatisfied with comfort in their space. That's not a really good stat. If we're on Yelp, no one's coming to our buildings. And so holistically across the commercial real estate marketplace, we want to deliver better comfort. That's how you get tenants to re-sign. That's how you have a productive workday. So we've got energy, now we have comfort. And then the next is, surprises or clarity of knowing what's going on in the building. Pete talked about, hey, do we really know what's going on? This is a brand new building. Well, we should, but all of a sudden the building starts to get out of whack and your EUI is climbing, and maybe you're running your equipment harder than needed, and so it fails before that life cycle cost that you've budgeted as an owner. And so, okay, 80% of our pieces of equipment are hitting a life cycle cost before we would anticipate. That's the problem. And so can we start to solve that with looking at data differently, as well as can we start to solve some of the constraints we're seeing in the marketplace from having enough staff to actually maintain and operate buildings. Each building example, right, there was one building operator for 150,000 square feet. That's 7 days a week. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that would have been a multiple person team helping to operate that building. So how do you actually do that today? And so we'll continue to talk a little bit more about that. But this is the challenge. This is, for me, is always good to reset. Like, why do we care about putting more software into facilities, and what are we trying to do with it? Next, again, I just think it's helpful to take a step back and think about, okay, we've got our issues: comfort, clarity, and efficiency with energy. And do we even know this is the right prescription? Okay, software's been out there for long enough now, running fault detection, and we're seeing, yes, hey, Berkeley Lab went out, collected data, and said you can, over multiple years, continue to save energy and potentially save more and more energy over time through your continuous commissioning. You saw in Pete's example with ATS in Denver, building design was at 90 EUI after energy savings campaign with smart buildings technology. They're actually below their design. So that's really promising to see those use cases out there, and helps to save most likely tenants utility spend. And then operational savings. Pacific National Lab out here in Washington has also done a study on the other side. So for the building owners who maybe are thinking about a CapEx investment in smart buildings, but their tenants pay all of their utilities, may say, well, hey, there's no ROI for me personally in the energy savings. That's not going to help my financial spreadsheet. And I'm in business as a for-profit entity. I'm not a not-for-profit. But hey, guess what? We're starting to see that there's real operational savings by eliminating breakdowns, reducing downtime. So that's happy tenants, and then increased productivity of doing the right maintenance at the right time. So if you hadn't seen these stats, these are pretty common out there, or starting to be so. You can go self-serve them from all of these entities yourself as an owner or property manager, or building engineer. Helpful for me, though, to see that, yes, it's not just this unique one-off in Denver. It is happening holistically around the marketplace. Now I'm just going to do a shout out for Nexus Labs. For those of you in the audience who haven't heard about Nexus Labs, started by a gentleman named James Dice. He's grown his team in the last couple months, and is kind of passion project to full-blown company. And finding the right technology, the engine Pete talked about, has never been easier. Also, your local utilities are trying to make that easier and easier. So if you haven't gone to Nexus Labs, I would implore you to do so. Tons and tons of great educational content out there. And then this year, James has started posting a buyer's hub or a tower of how do I get all this technology in my facility, and it's providing kind of impartial reviews that's not skewed by a vendor like a McDonald-Miller or an ATS, and helps you as an owner think about how do you go get into your building. So if you hadn't heard about it, it's just worth a plug here, so you can think about how would I actually procure the right technology. Moving past technology into the process, I want to walk through what we have learned is a pretty good fit, or seems to be driving continuous success and pushing your EUI down. And this does not McDonald-Miller proprietary. I would imagine almost every service provider has a very similar version of this roadmap out there. And it's because we probably all started doing it the wrong way first. So our first fault detection installations we installed it very much like a project, like we would have done with controls, and handed the keys to the clients. And then guess what? That person either switched to a different facility management company or was already wearing 10 other hats. It was 1 to 2 building engineers in the building, and they couldn't take on this additional responsibility. So now we have this capital improvement project, or this technology that was put into a building, and they're not getting any return on investment. So it pretty quickly, we realized with our customers that was not going to be effective, and the service provider needed to provide support throughout the life cycle until a habit was built with the technology. Some clients, for us, have just decided they want to keep us on in perpetuity. Others are asking for a 2-year training program and then getting off, and then they go off and be successful without McDonald Miller. But what that looks like is you need a party, customer or service partner, to review the data and then develop the scope. Is this an operational fix? Is this a capital improvement fix? And then you need to track if that work's getting done, whether that's in a property manager's work order system, or in a service provider's work order system, or in a merged database that you guys are sharing, Excel spreadsheet. You guys choose the tool, but you need to track if the work's getting done. And ideally, your service partner can help very quickly solve those issues. So Pete's talking about going back to the control service and HVAC service contracts. You need someone who can speak that language, or just go self-perform that work. In my opinion, for the contracts that have been the most successful, gotten through the low-hanging fruit the quickest, and actually driven a sub 1-year ROI on install, your service partner needs to be able to speak that language. What this looks like is different from a 12-month schedule. Again, we're talking about process here. What's the process? So assuming the technology is right, we've had huge leaps and bounds in the last couple of years with different vendors bringing better fault detection and tenant engagement applications to the market for smart buildings. But how do you make that real? And it's most likely reducing down your scheduled maintenance visit and allocating some of that budget for demand services that are triggered off of insights you've gotten from data. And when we talk about data having the right context, we still are kind of in the camp of you need an expert to help drive the action. That can be on your own staff as an owner, facility manager, or you can be using a vendor and buy a bucket of hours. Hey, I want 4 hours a month from this individual to help drive action in my facilities. So what we're seeing across this 12-month cycle is we have a kind of peppering of looking at data, on demand services with your service provider of choice, and then your regular preventative maintenance visits. Ideally, you're able to scope some of those down. If you're a 24/7 facility that requires lots of filter changes, most likely not as much wiggle room there, maybe for compliance issues, biotech, healthcare, but commercial office space, there's opportunity to make some changes there based on the actual performance of your building and move that budget into getting ahead of comfort or energy issues sooner. A little bit of a process that we're finding is successful to actually get a return on your data. So case study for you guys, really, really quickly here, King County Library System in the Pacific Northwest. We have, I think now 50 of their buildings running through a program that's HVAC service, controlled service, and then smart building service. So an analyst looking at data and helping to drive action. King County is running these buildings with 2 building engineers. So 50 buildings, 2 people. And what they have said is we're going to use a full service provider to accomplish the mission here and drive comfort and energy savings. And they have buildings of all different sizes. In some of the city centers, they're quite large, 5-story towers, things of that nature, large floor plates, different systems, radiant floor, terminal units, all the whole 9 yards for from a controls and HVAC perspective, because they've been built over many, many years as the Seattle region has grown, the King County region has grown. And the reason I chose King County is because we're talking about data for the other person. I don't have a large campus. I don't have a 70-story high rise that has the name of my company on the side. How do I invest in this? or get a return on investment, be part of the technology trend. And you can do it on all sorts of building types. And really, you're just buying buckets of hours in a program from your service provider. Does not need to be McDonald-Miller. You're creating a structure that works for you and the amount of staff you have on your team and what your service provider can help you with. That's a wrap of kind of the overview perspective from Pete, Jason, and I, and now we're going to jump into some moderated discussion. So if you haven't put any questions in the Q&A, now is the time to start typing those in, and we'll get going with the first ones.
Awesome. Thank you, Reed, for your presentation, and Jason and Pete, if you guys want to come off mute. We do have a couple questions that the audience already put in. So before we get into full moderated discussion, kind of want to answer those questions for the audience. So have a question for Jason. Jason, which commissioning program do you see the highest participation from, and why?
I think both the existing building commissioning and the monitoring base have seen definitely an uptick in recent day or months, I guess over the last year, mainly because of the clean building law that was passed here in Washington, where it's based off of performance of your buildings. And a lot of folks have had a trouble kind of identifying the path to kind of get to that compliance component. So both of those have definitely taken a decent uptick in the last year to date. I think out of both of them, I think the monitoring base has probably taken a larger jump, simply because I think being able to deploy this across, if they have a portfolio or their building, is a little bit lighter of a lift for the customer than to do a full investigation and developing the reporting. So I think that a lot of customers are looking for that kind of technology-based solution to kind of fix and move on.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. And then we got one more that just came in for Reed while we're on the topic, or just shortly after your presentation. But do you have any way of helping customers prioritize action items that arise from data analytics, i.e. most energy savings, et cetera? I guess it's for you, Reed, but anybody can answer.
Yeah, happy to answer that. I would say the typical trend with any kind of market leading FDD application or software is there's a weather model for each equipment type that's out there. And then you compare expected operation versus how it's operating within your region with your weather set. And so these kind of at scale software companies have been able to compile a really robust, this is what we would expect. And even 5 years ago, that did not exist. These rough order of magnitude of how much energy or how much dollars in utility savings would I get if I fix X, if I help this fan wall not run 24/7, or in Pete's example, if I told my optimum start to move from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. and maximum start time to 4 hours to 2 hours, that would be pretty complex to get it to be accurate. A lot of manual energy engineering to be done. We've seen that time frame get whittled way down from software partners, which is really awesome for the owners and contractors to have a more reliable data set. So for energy savings, we're typically looking at the unit of energy that you would be saving, whatever your feed is, whether it's natural gas or electricity, and then you can convert that via utility rates to dollar savings. And then for the rest of it, when we look at comfort and mechanical reliability, what we're seeing is kind of industry standard right now is a score. So 0 to 100, most everyone here is used to a 0 to 100 grade rating. Right. We all went through elementary school, and that's what we can look at from an equipment basis. Hey, how comfortable am I in this space? And A, B, C, D. And we're looking at set points and airflow and things of that nature for comfort. And then mechanical is, am I following guidelines for equipment operations, short cycling compressors, things of that nature, and can again convert that to a score rating. So it's very easy to prioritize action.
Got it. Yeah, I know. I think I know personally, I got a lot out of that slide, with the 30, 40, 60% for energy comfort and mechanical equipment. So yeah, that's a great question and a great way to prioritize. So I'm going to open up. We've got a few more questions in. Again, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A chat function box. But the panel, I want to get into the moderated discussion. And this panel, you guys described the current sets of practices regarding data analytics for what is perhaps the largest segment of the CI market, namely those who manage smaller portfolios of mid-sized properties. My first question is, why hasn't the deployment of multitude of analytical applications solved the problem of actionable data for this segment of the market? And Pete, want to say it's been a little while since we heard from you. So why don't we start with you, and then we'll let the other panelists chime in.
Yeah, though this may sound a little redundant from what I talked about in my presentation, and Reed actually mentioned it as well. When we first started getting into this data analytics space, we thought, wow, these software tools are so cool. We're going to deploy it, hand it over, and then our job's done. We're going to walk away and life is great and we're saving the world and all that. And like Reed mentioned, and I mentioned as well, it was a little bit of a cold water in the face when we realized that just by handing these tools over to building operators doesn't ensure success by any means. All we really did at that point in time is give them one more screen, one more thing, one more to their already really busy schedules to deal with. And it wasn't until, and I don't know when this happened, a handful of years back, we realized that this, especially this market where you have building operators that, Reed mentioned, I think in his case study, 2 people, I think it was around 1 million square feet or something like that. In my case study is 1 person for, it was a 150,000 square foot building plus 150,000 square feet of parking, that we realized that there had to be a process and a service in place, not only for the deployment of the analytics, but helping them through the process of identifying the issues, prioritizing the issues, and then actually making those corrective actions take place. Just by, I think one of the biggest hurdles was just by handing the software over, the adoption didn't take place. Right. And so I think that was the main reason it hasn't been, widely accepted in the market. It was more about the process, not the technology.
Yeah, your 3 Ps, right? Yeah. Reed, Jason, anything you guys want to add on that?
Just to dovetail into kind of what Pete was saying is, I think early on what we were seeing was a lot of installed software fixed my problem. And we were having trouble kind of developing a program around that because we weren't really able to prove the savings were there or that they were consistent or persistent. So it wasn't until, Pete said, that we really started focusing on the process to kind of not just implement, but actually maintain a process over time. And even now I have, customers that have, large portfolio of buildings where they did an install and they came back to us. They're like, well, that didn't work. We'd like to rethink this. And they've kind of come to kind of phase 2 of monitoring-based commissioning, and they want to implement the commissioning program rather than implement the software. So that's similar.
Was there a common point of failure then? Like, have you seen it with all your customers, Jason? Is it, the process, it's the process, the people, was there any specific thing that a reoccurring theme you keep seeing?
I think there's probably a couple. I think the general issue with implementing opportunities within your building is a matter of having the amount of resources that a customer has. I think a lot of folks that want to go through the commissioning process tend to be not resource rich in that department to have people to go out, fix, turn wrenches. So a lot of stuff did go on, and a lot of commissioning projects would take like years just to kind of get the amount of resources they needed to do this in-house. Secondarily, I would say that a lot of it has to do with the failure point being not kind of implementing a change management process where it's treated as a retrofit. Put in lighting, there's nothing more you have to do. I did commissioning, there's nothing more I need to do. So we were definitely seeing a failure of persistence of savings. We were seeing, customers kind of confused that, this is an ongoing process. It's not one and done. This is
Right.
something that, and that's why, for our programs, we do require that, management, operations staff, everyone from each level is a part of the fix rather than just seeing, budgets go across the desk at some point.
Yeah, that engaged owner is so important to get work done.
Mhm.
I want to, sorry for jumping in, Reed. I'm sure you got something to say, but I wanted to add on to something real quick. I mentioned how at first we saw the failure take place once after we deployed the software. We thought, hand it over, it's all done. Then we realized, okay, we need a little bit more process in place in that consultative approach where we meet with the customer and talk about this, have a regular cadence, accountability. We missed one part when we started doing that. There was nothing set aside for the budgeting for the corrective actions. In Reed, I really liked your calendar you showed where not only did you have that regular cadence of the meetings, but then you had specific days set aside to implement those corrective actions. You can have the technology, you can have those meetings and the cadence, but if you don't have the process in place for implementing the corrective actions, you're not going to realize the benefits. So that was kind of the second piece that had to happen is not waiting to the process going to start trying to fix these things, but have a mechanism in place to fix them before you even start the process.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Totally double down on that. It's kind of sentiment. You have to be able to go do the things. Otherwise, there's no ROI. You're spending money, and you're not going to be actually operating your building differently. So I question, right, was, why hasn't this type of operation been available to, outside of the really, really big commercial real estate players? I would really think until the last 3 years, contractors have really struggled to bring clarity of what is the offering. That has been a learning journey, right? Started with handing you the keys, then some hand holding, and then maybe more kumbaya and the consultation meetings, into when really how I would think about it. Like if I go to the doctor, I'm looking for a prescription. I'm not looking for the doctor to get out 6 different medical textbooks and say, these are the areas of focus that I have and expertise. Tell me, what you want me to choose from. And that's what the beginning of FDD and smart buildings really, my interpretation would have felt like for owners. Hey, the world is your oyster. We can build whatever you want. We have this really flexible software. And software companies have said, cool, we need to be really, really good at a few things rather than being capable of many things. And so you've seen vendors get a lot more specific in their offerings. Hey, I am artificial intelligence for optimum start. I'm going to help your building start when it needs to. Hey, I am fault detection software. I'm going to find when your building is not operating the same way that we would expect it to via ASHRAE guidelines. And so you have these vendors who are getting really specific, and that really did not happen until, coming on 2 years ago. While those kind of specificities have happened, making it more digestible for someone to go to the doctor and get a prescription. Hey, this is what I would recommend for you in your use case. We've also seen a price reduction happen from an install perspective. Getting to data is faster. Controls have gotten smarter. We have more IP-based control systems, better networks within buildings. So getting to the data is faster, mapping all the data to actually drive it with better context, reducing the amount of time you need from a consultant or a McDonald-Miller or an ATS to actually drive that action. It's making us faster. And so we've seen a net cost decrease in the service as well, which should make it more achievable for smaller portfolios of buildings, even down to the single portfolio buildings. And we've seen customers say yes to that more so in the last 2 years than they have in the past.
Yeah. So just to piggyback off that, Reed, so where do you think, where is FDD working and, where is it possibly falling short? So, of course, the data, it's working somewhere, and not everywhere, but where have you seen some successes?
I either think where we have seen successes for the most part is either when the owner says, I can't provide you a champion, or the property manager says, I can't provide you a champion to run the smart buildings program, but I can provide you budget. Cool, let us run. We'll work with your third-party vendors, a controlled contractor, your OEMs for your chillers, things of that nature as a service provider. Or alternatively, I'm an owner, property manager, and I want to have more of an active role. I will provide a champion. I will have someone at the cadence of meetings that you choose, quarterly, monthly. As soon as you start going semi-annually, you need to slide more of that budget probably back to your vendors to be taking action on your behalf. But we've seen things be successful in both ways. That, more reins are given over, or hey, we have a project champion. Some of our campuses that we work with, of commercial real estate and healthcare, we've been working with the same group of people now for 5 years, and tons of familiarity. Those meetings are super productive. We're getting lots done. But that they provided a champion. Other end, they need to allocate the budget to get the return on investment. Otherwise, it's not worth doing. That would be my honest conversation with the customer. Hey, go spend your money on one more preventative maintenance visit a year if you can't get across the finish line with this.
Accountability is key. P, would you agree from your standpoint?
Oh yeah, I mean, our success is primarily based on those customers that have, like Reed was saying, that champion or multiple champions, that we have a regular cadence, regular meetings. There's a means or budget to fix things as well. That's the key to success, I believe. It's interesting, thinking of this scale versus, individual buildings. And when you're talking about scale and buildings that, a portfolio, dozens, if not hundreds of buildings, how I look at analytics in the process is a little bit different. Analytics running over lots and lots of buildings, it's high level fault detection. It's kind of the easy stuff. What I really like about when we get into some of these smaller buildings is we can dive way deeper beyond whatever fault detection can find, and you really get into the weeds. And then the example of the building that I brought up, it has some unique systems, nothing that's too crazy, but just how certain things operate when that second air handler comes on, and how does from an airflow standpoint, and what happens with air going up the other supply riser and little things like that. It's not necessarily the fault detection that finds that. It's part of the process. When you find maybe a certain fault comes up, then you start diving into it, and then you get into a rabbit hole and you find some of these deeper issues. So I really like the fact that when you work at these smaller buildings, not only do you have the power of fault detection at a high level for some of the things that you can find across the board, but you can really dive in deeper and really get to better building performance, because you're looking at one building and you know everything about that building. So I think you can have some interesting, even better successes at the small building level as well.
Got it. Hey, why we've got a bunch of questions that came in, Pete. Before we shift our conversation just a little bit, I want to, since you're the closest to sales, want to know if you know this number at the top of your head. What is this? Alex from the audience asked, what's the standard pricing protocol for analytics software? Do you have that magic number off the top of your head?
I don't have that magic number, and I will explain why. I have customers that we have a customer up in Alaska that has, I don't know, I think there's probably 50 schools or something like that within their district. And we provide this type of service, but we also are cognizant of they only have so much money to spend in a budget. So we figure out how to get the most bang for the buck. So in this analytics service that we're providing, we still do the same processes, but we limit the data. And part of the reason we limit the data is because some of their systems just don't even have the capability for bringing the data in. So we're only maybe bringing in meters and sub-meters per building and being able to identify performance based on interval data, looking at optimum start, looking at things running too long. And then we have some buildings that, wow, it's a brand new building. We have tons of opportunities, and we're integrated to every building automation system point, security systems, other things, and just tons of data. And so the cost per square foot goes up. So I've seen it where it's very, very minimal. We're talking, you know, a couple of cents per square foot type of thing to for an ongoing service, to in more than a couple of cents in the 20 cents type range.
Right.
So it really just depends on the
just
service. And
Okay.
I hate to give that answer.
I
but
know
it
you didn't
depends
sell
on-
me anything yet today, Pete.
Yeah, I'm not,
Classic Pete. Classic
yeah, I
Pete.
know, dodging the question.
Always
I
depends.
don't know. I would like ask Reed that question. Reed,
Yeah,
what's
Reed,
the
let's
answer
see.
there?
What's an operations manager say, Reed?
Yeah, right. Well, I think about it in the building blocks because we have to staff
Yeah.
the work.
Mhm.
What we found has been a lot more accurate to set expectations for ourselves and the customers is staying away from square footage. If we need to convert a price to square footage for a customer to think about it within their budgetary
Right, yeah.
mindset and how they think about it, easy. That's done. We do that after the fact. We don't look at data points. That usually takes too much cost up front. In the exploratory or design phase, we found for clients, that was kind of the original pricing model that a lot of FDD softwares and even in tenant-based softwares, things of that nature for tenant engagement was, you know, how much data are we going to be moving over the pipe? That's all related to your cloud storage, everything. It's a very reasonable way to price. It's not very digestible. It's also hard to estimate that without doing lots and lots of detailed research. And maybe the client doesn't want to move forward. And so now they've paid for an estimate where you can actually be pretty darn close by just taking it in an asset density. So how many pieces of equipment are we going to be looking at? Submeters, you know, utility grade meters, air handlers, terminal units, chillers, that sort of things. You know, how many, you know, tenant engagement iPads do we need? That's where you would go a per unit price of units. And so that's how we look at the install. And then the service is all just hours. You know, how much time do you want to buy? How much of an expert's time do you want to buy? You know, think about that, like, you know, going to the physical therapist or a personal trainer at the gym. Like, hey, I paid for an hour at the gym with this person, and they're going to help me add context to my data, drive accountability, and get an ROI on this system. So install per piece of equipment, service is buckets of hours.
Yeah.
And I will try to answer this question based on a project I was looking at yesterday. And just to be clear, I am not a salesperson.
I know, but you're the closest thing, Pete.
Yeah,
You're the
I know.
closest one.
But anyways, we were looking at a roughly 1 million square foot building, new building, and for the deployment costs, this was just the other day, it was a little over 5 cents for the deployment. And then from a ongoing maintenance or the ongoing process, it was only a couple cents a square foot. But it goes directly back to what Reed was saying. It's kind of that bucket of hours theory. And then I was talking to one of our service people. I was explaining, hey, we're not, just because if we added, let's say 25% to the square footage of the building, our monthly meetings aren't going to get 25% longer. We're still going to meet monthly for probably 1 hour a month, because no one can say, oh, I have 4 hours a month I can meet. We're still going to meet 1 hour a month. We're still going to identify XYZ number of issues, and then we're still going to put those in front of you know, whoever's going to implement that work to work on. So just because it's not necessarily directly related to the square footage, yes, obviously there's going to be more opportunities for fixes. But it's, you know, it's kind of like what Reed was saying, it can be buckets of hours based as well. So some customers may want more, some may want less handholding.
Got it.
I
Right.
would say expect to pay 15 cents a square foot and then another 15 cents to fix everything they find.
That's my guy right there, Jason. You're hired.
Done. Was
That's
that
what I
so
was
hard,
looking
Pete?
for.
Reed, come on.
All right, good. Well, hey, Jason, hope that was a great response, great answer. There is another thing on utility rebates, another question. What do you see where, anonymous attendee asks, where is in the process do utility rebates or early adopter incentives enter the conversation with customers? So I'll start with you, Jason, but Pete and Reed, feel free to chime in.
As soon as possible. I think that we can add a level of clarity for some of our more, you know, complex incentives that we have, you know, for instance, commissioning. I think once you realize maybe that you you qualify for the early adopter incentive, that's the time to start bringing people, circling the wagons and talking about where the funding mechanisms are going to come from. So short answer, earlier the better.
Earlier the better. All right, good. Pete, Reed, agree?
Yeah, for sure.
Don't be a procrastinator.
The earlier the better. The real behind the scenes answer is, and Jason's a great partner and the local utilities for us, typically have a strong representative, but there's typically new programs every year, trying to figure out what are these tweaks to drive more engagement. There's also been a lot of new compliance expectations rolling out. And so making sure you understand how those align with a very specific building, a very specific customer building type, what's in the building, data centers, office space, healthcare. At McDonald-Miller, we have 75 account managers who are out actively talking to customers, making sure we're taking care of them appropriately. That's a huge lift also for a contractor to make sure you have the right expertise across 75 people to bring those utility incentives to the customer early enough. And so we have some internal expert, program managers that are working to educate our teams, taking what the utilities are doing, but the intent would be early enough, but it's not an easy hill to climb sometimes, would be kind of my take. And that's why, Jason and Pete and I all exist, is to try and make that easier.
All right.
I want to add one more piece of context here, simply because I know that a lot of the attendees don't either live in the Pacific Northwest or don't have PSC as their utility provider. But I think the takeaway here is that, PSC is my experience working with different utilities across the greater Western United States. PSC is probably kind of on the leading edge when it comes to utility incentives. And the fact that they went, and they're one of the first ones that I'm aware of that put together incentive packages for this monitoring-based commissioning, kind of shows you that they understand that there really are savings in this type of process and program. Utilities do not just give utility incentives because they want to feel good about themselves. They have requirements that they have to meet. And they see this as a real opportunity for efficiency within the built environment. So just because your utility locally, wherever you may be, may not offer these incentives, doesn't mean that there isn't value and efficiency to be gained by programs like this. And I'm sure if you are out there, you can push your local utilities to look into something like that. And I'm sure PSC would happy to share their experience with these types of programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pete. And I've got a pretty good national purview to other utility rebate companies out there. There are others doing it, coast to coast, but not everyone's adopted what Jason shared with us today. So if you are attending from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, reach out to your local utility company, and I'm sure they've got a program, or at least you could tell them they should have a program. So had a comment come in. Seattle City Light offer, maybe the question is, does Seattle City Light offer commissioning incentives? Peter, Reed, or Jason?
I can answer this because I work with them a whole lot.
Okay.
They actually do. Our incentives were designed to work with one another. So because we have a lot of overlapping territory, so the requirements that Seattle City Light has for their commissioning is very similar to the ones that we have, and by very similar I mean exact. So we did that. They do have an option A and an option B. It's a little different than how we do it with the a la carte option with the monitoring-based commissioning, whereas they essentially offer either the existing building commissioning as a program, option A, or option B, where you go through it using monitoring-based commissioning approach for the existing building commissioning program. So they have the two approaches for their utility, but everything is aligned pretty well.
Okay. Again, right before we shift to a whole different, our final topic of the of today, as service providers, are you actively ensuring you and your customers are utilizing both the prescriptive and custom utility incentives? And if not, what would help that relationship and ensure your organizations are reporting the savings from your services? Comes from one of our attendees. Who wants to take that one?
I can take at least part of it, and I'll say that we do not leverage every and all utility incentives as best we can. I will acknowledge that. We have many customers that we run these programs without the utility even being aware of it. The case study that I mentioned and I talked about at the very beginning, there is no utility involvement. They probably have no understanding of what's happening and why their efficiencies increased. I think the second part of the question is what can be done better, and I think it's more of a education for our team of, like Reed was saying, I think he had 75 account managers that he's dealing with. We don't have nearly that many and that many service salespeople, but we have a large group. And sometimes it's really hard educationally to understand or have them understand how to procure these incentives, how to work with utilities. And so it's about education. But the fact that we have a lot of these programs going on, even without the utility incentives, show that there's value there. It's a lot about the sales cadence and how does the utilities fit into that sales cadence as well. That's the challenge that we tend to run into.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, very similarly to you could have designed a building without an IP-based controller, and then when it's actually built in 2 years, like that's the latest and greatest technology. You're looking at a brand new shiny building, you're going like, wait, why doesn't it have the thing that I just saw the news briefing? It should be new. It's like, well, the design happened 2 years ago. Sometimes you could be developing scope and then a utility incentive comes out, a program comes out, and you're already at the 90th yard line with that project and getting it going for a client. And so the timing can just be off. I think in the past, and this happens, less and less frequently, sometimes the amount of due diligence to report data to receive the rebate, it can start to kind of slim down the ROI there of, a number of hours an energy engineer needs to spend tuning a weather normalized model and delivering back to a client, can slim down the amount of money the client's actually pocketing. However, I would say with the ones we're talking about today, monitoring-based commissioning, that's not as prevalent. That was maybe something 5 years ago. You had to be really careful about, okay, we want the rebate money. How much are we going to spend to go get that rebate money? I think PSE and the other locals in Pacific Northwest have gotten a lot smarter about that to try and make the rebate money impactful and meaningful. So that's been cool.
Okay.
Josh, I'm game for, go for it, Jason.
Oh, I was just going to say to anonymous attendee, I think that this is one of the kind of the greater issues that we've seen is, what Pete and Reed have kind of mentioned of moving forward with projects without kind of the implementation. Because, it's not just Pete I'm talking to. It's not just Reed I'm talking to. There's a sales department. There's, a whole litany of folks that are a part of creating these projects. And kind of because we don't expect Reed and Pete to fix the problem for us. What we've kind of done to overcome this challenge is to actually start going to them and bringing outreach to them and training to them, their sales force and on down. We actually hired a new person for our group for the explicit purpose to be our outreach to contractors so that they're aware, but better trained for like what we have to offer and how it can help their bottom line or value add to customers. And that is something that we're implementing here to really dial in kind of the total combined or sum total of all of our knowledge in order to help the customers receive more incentives.
All right. Got it. Reed, what were you going to say before Jason spoke?
Oh, I'm good for that next anonymous attendee question.
Okay, yeah, if
about
you want to
different
just
screens.
take that would be great.
But Jason's point about outreach from the utility, I think the prior question is worded like it's from someone who works at a utility. Hey, we put in our mechanical department, our team puts in a lot of Trane chillers. Well, guess what? The account manager from Trane walks through our office once a week, educates us on the product, gets back to our phone calls all the time. We partner with Trane quite a bit. And so, to Jason's point about that outreach and making sure we're educated, sure, I'll take that all day as a vendor for making sure our sales groups are educated. So they're, getting in front of clients in the right way at the right time. More help there definitely couldn't hurt. I think Pete and I will have lots of fun with this next question about like, there's lots of different screens for all these different use cases within a building for smart buildings. You could have fault detection, you could have tenant engagement, where they're telling you if they're comfortable or not, or reserving conference rooms, whatever that may be. And so what has been the industry idea or trend is, okay, can we get these all onto one screen or to one platform? And my coaching at this point in time would be don't do that. Don't try and smash all this data into one place. Use your point solutions. There's a reason on your iPhone you have a banking app, you have a app for calling on your phone, there's for texting, there's for going to Instagram, you can go to OfferUp. There's all these point solutions because they're built for that specific thing. Think about your desktop like your iPhone. You have all your web browsers, you're going to go to these solutions or your applications on your computer. Let them live there. Get the habit of operating using the tool 3-5 years, and then think about, hey, how much more efficiency could I drive by getting them all into one integrated visual? The reason I'm pretty passionate about this is because I thought the very same thing. We worked really hard at McDonald-Miller to push all of our stuff into one dashboard. And guess what? All the users said, well, this quarter of the dashboard's optimized for energy engineers, but I'm an HVAC tech and I really need to see these 3 things about this chiller. And then, over here, I'm an energy engineer and you're telling me all about the comfort of the space and my airflow readings. And I really just want to know about optimum start stop. That's my biggest leader and my set points. And so you have all these different users. And right now I would say, let your users be their unique selves, use those point solutions. You're going to spend more money on trying to put that into one place. Then you should just really be spending those on the fixes in the building for the first couple of years, and then you've got a good habit and then drive forward. That would be my take on that.
Funny, when I started in this industry in the mid-90s, and I started with one of the major big 3 control contractors, and this is back now 25 years ago, 26 years ago. The big push was what we called back then was Division 17. Basically one, we didn't even call it pane of glass back there. It was one CRT monitor to have, fire, security, HVAC, everything on one pane. So that was the push even 25 years ago. The technology probably wasn't quite there. The technology is a little bit more there now, but to Reed's point, everyone has different use cases. And so it doesn't always make sense. I think the question was asking about, I think maybe specifically to Reed, and you had 50 different library buildings or something like that. Now there is a means if they could have 20 different control systems, and typically whatever the data analytics platform is, whatever that software is, one of the goals that they have is to collect, move, and normalize that data, so you can take data from all these different disparate systems and kind of normalize it in one place for whatever the goal is. And to Reed's point, whether it is about comfort or whether it is about energy or something else, at least what those tools can do is normalize and align that data. So that's how you get around that when you have a lot of disparate systems.
Yeah, if there's any Mint mobile users out there or any other budgeting application that you use on your phone, right, you are connecting all these different software pieces into that specific thing, but it's very hyper focused on banking. You're not also trying to put your workout information in the same Mint mobile app. It's still very specific to financials. And so let controls and HVAC be that, let tenant engagement be a thing. I do think the industry will get there, but the cost to do it right now still seems a little foolhardy in some cases, unless you have a massive team, big buildings. I think we'll see it in those places happen first before it comes to kind of the audience here, which is data for the other people.
Yeah. All right. Well, there is one question before we get to our last topic, but want to see if any of you guys can answer this one. Are there any statistics out there comparing EUI reduction to staff commitment? I don't think we put a number to it, but that did come from Jeff in the audience. That's another Pete question. Yeah, no rules. Tough one.
I don't have any data to correlate EUI reduction, efficiency to staff hours. I've never attempted to do that. So yeah, I can't help with that one. That's an interesting one. I think that sounds a little bit more like a Jason question to me through your program. Seems like something you have to report on.
I think the closest I could come to it is from the back door, where I think I can identify after talking to a customer and understanding their maintenance or the level of maintenance that they regularly do with their buildings, usually is a good indication of where that UI savings might land. Whether you're talking to someone that is religious about their O&Ms, they have preventative maintenance, they're on track, they are just talking to you because someone made them, versus someone's like, I have no idea what's going on in my building. We have not gone in the mechanical space for a month, so it could still be working, we're not sure.
Right.
So you can kind of, from that end, you can tell where you might land on savings. But on the other side, just haven't really tracked it, and it's a really, I don't want to say unknowable, but close to unknowable quantity.
All right. Well, we appreciate the question, and we'll move on to the last topic, probably where we should start, where we probably started without even, letting everybody know we were starting there. But, many parts of the country, buildings, sometimes carbon performance standards are the new reality for building owners. Corporations are focusing on ESG standards. There's a reason why we're talking about data and context today. And just want to finish with this question here to the group. How does data and analytics align with these efficiency mandates like Washington State, clean building performance standards, all the other different standards that are around there from New York City to Seattle and everywhere in between? What is the why?
I'll start with that one. So be it Washington State Clean Building Performance Standard, we do work, I mentioned in Denver, there's Energized Denver, there's a Colorado Building Performance Standard. I know different parts of the country, more and more of these are coming into play. And really the way I look at data and analytics, how they fit into this is data and analytics is that non-capital means of hitting whatever EUI targets you potentially have. We like to work with customers within these performance requirements, and we kind of try to understand where their building at is now, where their target may be. And if they're only a handful of points away from their target, 5, 10 points, maybe a little bit more, depending on what we see in the building, we look at these programs as being fantastic ways of meeting those targets without those capital expenditures and identifying capital measures to meet that. So we use this as a tool for setting goals. The building that I used as my case study, I think with their blended goal for had to hit, I can't remember if it was 2025 or 2026, it was an 85. And we're able just to get under there right now, but then they have another target they have to hit. So it's this progression, seeing how far we can get before the capital gets spent.
Got it. Reed, Jason?
Yeah, for sure. As a human on this planet, love all the compliance and the intent of them. As someone who's into capitalism, less into the burden and the forcing of the hand. But we've also seen under our own power and volition, we haven't taken as much of active intent there. And so what the compliance is really asking for, regardless of what state you're in, is, do you know how your building is working? Do you understand the impact it's having on the environment from an energy consumption standpoint? And where we see data reporting is, we would recommend, to Pete's point, start small, understand from a macro perspective where you're at. Where is your EUI? Where is your target? If it's a large delta, you're most likely looking at capital investment to improve your building. And there's more things coming to market to bear, where either it's going to be federally state funded through early adopters and or from private market of people willing to invest in green initiatives for saving energy, which is going to help building owners maybe get access to cheaper capital for those capital improvements. But if you're far away from your target, you're most likely having a larger investment, whether that's a heat recovery chiller, if you're thinking HVAC, or a controls retrofit from maybe pneumatics, if you're still in a pneumatic situation, or maybe just an upgrade so you have more control across more devices. whatever that may be. But if you're close, you can go straight to, fault detection, or maybe something like a BrainBox AI, or a Hank, where you're looking at optimum start with ML or AI. You could look at those things maybe a little faster if you don't have that capital improvement. What we're always going to recommend is at the end, you do continuous commissioning supplemented by software. There is a labor constraint in the marketplace. Cost of the labor is going up due to the constraint. So we have to be really judicious with where we're putting the really smart people, how much time we're putting them there. And so if we can supplement it with tools like fault detection, then that's going to be better for the client. So continuous commissioning programs typically are going to be the best way to stay in that EUI target if you have a low delta. So capital improvement, then continuous commissioning would be the general trend.
Jason, anything you want to add there?
Sure. I think that how we look at it, and it's from a slightly different perspective, but I think we all look at this, we look at this kind of like the different paths. And I think this one is a great path to get to that compliance component, because it doesn't limit you just to operational maintenance. It also brings out some capital improvement opportunities that you may have. And I agree, like, if you're, close to there, you're 5% off, like this is a great way to streamline, find optimization. It's also been, a really good path forward for those that are seeking compliance in a time when, like supply chains have been a difficult challenge, or inflation is increasing and things like that. So some of the macro stuff can kind of lead customers to doing some of these smaller scale options that can really maximize the impact on their building.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I know we're getting close to wrapping up, and on behalf of just myself hosting this discussion, and I'm sure all the attendees, you three certainly put the data into context, and would like to just go around the horn one last time. If you have anything, 10 to 15 seconds, any final thoughts you want to share with the audience, please do, and if not, we'll wrap things up. Start, Pete, any closing thoughts?
I'll just reiterate that technology enables this, but it's the process and the people that make it happen.
Thank you. Jason?
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, the double down there, the other kind of comment I would make is events like Smart Buildings, hosted by Smart Building Center out of Seattle. Groups like Nexus in those communities are super, super important. We have a really big, there's the whole ocean to boil on this topic with energy consumption and compliance and building operations. How do you do it more efficiently? Typically, even in controls, right? Started in proprietary, moved to open protocol. My ask of everyone is sharing is caring. There's too many buildings out there. The technology is still complex. That's why I'm happy to sit here with Pete and talk. We work at, competing companies and competing regions. I'm happy to be here. There's too many buildings for one company to do it all. And so just please be active in the community, and you are, because you're listening to the audience. But that's going to be huge. The more people that are engaged and helping us rethink how you do triple net leases, and thinking how we get capital to people for these, projects to invest in their buildings, and how to keep, people entering the trades. There's lots of big gnarly problems out there, and the more involvement we have from the community, the better. So don't keep it close to the vest would be my ask. Share with your friends and your competitors.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, so that wraps it up. I know everyone, wish everybody a great rest of the SBX conference. The next virtual session will kick off in an hour, so enjoy your lunches, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.
Great. Thank you from the Smart Building Center to Josh and panel. Very informative. And we hope to see everybody again next sessions at 1 p.m. Thanks, Josh, and thanks to the panel.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.